wrote my new book, The Art of Caring Leadership, to be both a wake-up call and an invitation for leaders who want to uplift their teams and organizations by putting their people first. Most of us think we care, but caring leadership is about doing, taking action in a way that makes a tangible difference to our teams and our workplaces. Now, more than ever, at any time in history, we need to know what leading with heart actually means for us, for our workplaces, and for the world. The Art of Caring Leadership is a practical guide that will help you decipher what caring leadership means in practice through a framework that uncovers the steps you can take every single day. If your people know you care, not just about what they do, but who they are and can become, they will move mountains. To pre-order your copy of the book, visit theartofcaringleadership.com. In this episode of Leadership with Heart, you hear me talk for the second time on this show to LaToya Lyn, and she is the Vice President of Talent Strategy at Oscar Health. She is just a firecracker. She has a great energy about her. She's very knowledgeable. And we talked a little bit about the meaning of Black History Month for both of us, and how we think that there are ways to bring us all together, not necessarily having to separate us out. You'll hear again just her knowledge, her passion for her people, so, African Americans, but also at the same time, just her passion for people as a whole. And she really is a compassionate leader, one who really does try to open up safe spaces. And I just love that about her. So listen, and I hope you enjoy this interaction because we really are onto something every time we talk together. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. It's Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast. And today I am just adrenaline pumping. I'm just super excited to have LaToya Lyn on here again, guys. She was on here before and I had her on LinkedIn Live and she's in the book. And oh my gosh, I don't know how much more I just need to keep getting more of her. So you're here. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Heather. Well, honestly, firstly, I am actually, let's step back. Happy Valentine's Day weekend.
Yes, thank you. You too.
Black History Month.
Yes.
Year forever on. And also congratulations on your book. I am completely honored and, completely, just amazed by your work and also the privilege of, being mentioned in your book. So I'm just very thankful for that. But other than that, I am super excited and here. I love our chats. I feel like we're just having coffee and just talking on a back porch in Savannah, Georgia, about the goings-ons in the community.
Oh, I love it. Oh, I love it. That makes me feel a little bit slower, which is good. Because you're right. When you think about the South, it's in most cases, a little slower. And here we're just I'm not in New York, but I feel like I'm in New York. Where I'm just buzz, 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 buzz. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's awesome. I love that image. And I agree with you. I think just having these conversations and obviously I invited you on them because it is in February. So we're in Black History Month, right in the middle of the month. And we see a lot of things going around and, what does that mean to you, particularly given what happened last year in 2020, everything's been heightened now. What does this mean to you now? Anything different than it did, maybe in 2019?
Well, I think just what happened last summer is just a regular occurrence, right? I think that there was just a perfect storm of the world completely stopping with the pandemic and everyone's just hypersensitive and focused on social media and TV. And that just kind of sparked the right type of conversation going forward. As it relates to how I'm viewing Black History Month today or just now, Black history to me growing up was always a celebration. It was always something that we celebrated, that we thought through. It was always a plan. I remember when I was in junior high school, I grew up in St. Albans, Queens. So shout out to anybody listening from Queens, New York. We had the Kente cloth banner that was across, the classroom. And then we have our monthly assembly and either someone was doing African dancing or someone was reciting a poem from Langston Hughes and singing, Lift Every Voice, the Black National Anthem. That to me, when I think about Black History Month and, how it works, it's just super important for us to really keep that connected spirit and stay aligned when it comes to, the bigger picture, how we think about, Black history in general.
Yeah, that's true. I'm trying to think. During the Super Bowl, they interviewed a woman, and I think she may have been biracial. It's terrible that I can't think of. She is the CEO, so she's definitely I think the only one of the women CEOs that owns or something one of the teams. I apologize for not remembering her name, but I looked at it. I think she's biracial. But in it, she was talking about this idea of they were saying, well, you're the first woman, and you're the only woman of this and that. And she goes, I look forward to the day where we don't even have to have this conversation because it's not so unique that it just happens. And then the gentleman asked her, well, what do you say to the, little girls or the the little girls who are look up to you and aspire to your greatness, whatever. And she goes, you know what? I think, good for them. But having said that, I want us, we should be looking at us as just, humans and as adults. And we're not, it's not woman or man. It's that my goal again is for us to raise up. In this case, she was talking about women, so that we are there's no conversation. We don't talk about the difference because it's just non-existent. And I thought that it's so true, because when we think about that with people, African Americans and people of color, it's like, oh, you're so articulate, for they might not even say that. Oh, you're just so very articulate. They might not say for an African American woman, right?
Yeah, weird things like that always come out.
Yeah. And you're like, can we not? Or people will be like, yeah, I get you, sister. And I'm like, well, here's the thing. I'm not your sister. And here's how I know it. I'm the only child. So I know I have no siblings. So don't call me that, so it's like, these are the little things that we kind of live with, no matter how light or dark our skin, no matter how straight or curly our hair is, we all have to deal with it. And Black History Month, in my mind, is like, I know that we're trying to have it stand out, and we want to, the biggest thing is heightening the awareness of all that we have contributed in America, but in the world, really, because it's celebrated everywhere, not just here. It's in different times and described different ways, but it's not just it doesn't end up being just a U.S. celebration. And, but thinking about, how do we continue to amplify the voices? How do we continue to show that there's so much that has been contributed in the world? And we want to do that. But what I like about that, the woman's really tone when she was just talking about woman, is it would be nice when we don't have to differentiate one month to the next, and we do it because it doesn't naturally exist in our world. And it would be nice if we dream of this Pollyanna where it would actually exist in our world, right? We don't have to do that.
I mean, look, I think we are far from that. And in a sense, but I think that should be a good goalpost. Like I always said, Black History Month is just history, right? It's just really highlighting it's like focusing all of us in one time of the year, although many of us live it throughout the year. And there are other allies that focus on it throughout the year as well, around just remembering what Black people have done for this country and where they're about and what they're about and what they've accomplished and their names that are forgotten. It's just like an opportunity to never forget, those individuals that have done so much. I mean, I remember when I was in school, they're like, what is the history of Black history? Like, why do we celebrate this? There was always this joke, like, we get the shortest month of the year. Like, why is that? Why does that happen? And actually what happened was, I feel like his last name, his name is escaping me, but the father of Black History Month is his alias. And the reason why he created, Black History Month was because he wanted to acknowledge two prominent birthdays that happened to be in February. And one was Abraham Lincoln and the other one was Frederick Douglass. And it was actually started off as a week and then expanded over time into a month of just understanding those different histories. So when people are talking about Black history being about Black people, actually, it's also about a white guy.
Good point.
A president, a former president and a founding father of this country, and also our heroic abolitionist, Frederick Douglass. And I believe their birthdays are roughly 6 days or so apart. It's not a coincidence that, that happened. And he surrounded this celebration, his education just around that. Right. So, that's part of the history that people probably don't really talk too much about, but that's really why this is history. It is our overall history. And it's not about, the Atlantic slave trade, and it's not about the plantations and suffrages. All of that is important, and all of that is embedded in the stories, but it also talks about, we always hear the recurring amazing stories of like Malcolm X and Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King, but there's so many other, Black history, folks, figures who have, defined so many different things. Even Black history within our homes, like some of our parents, like my dad was the first, Black resident at Mount Sinai in the early 80s, right? And that's the 80s. So
yeah, exactly.
To me, that's some good Black history right there. So, again, like we can open up our hearts and minds and just kind of think deeply about it. But I think that is probably one of the biggest and most prominent memories for me when I think about Black history.
Yeah. As I think about that, it makes me think of, people going, well, why do you have to, again, so I say the same thing, but I say it from a different perspective. So that just like the woman who was the owner of that football team was like, well, I wish I didn't have to do that. I wish, and so folks on the other side that might be Caucasian may say something like, well, again, I don't understand why we're making such a big deal. Why are we highlighting it? Why do you call it Black Lives Matter? Why do you call it Black History Month? Well, yeah, we would love it where we wouldn't have to do that. So the only reason why we're doing that is because you're not paying attention. So we have to somehow differentiate. We have to bring it to the focus. Of course, all history matters. Of course, all lives matter. All of that matters. I think there's no debating that. It's just that until you can elevate all of these contributions, all of this history to just an equal playing field, we have to continue to highlight that they aren't exactly the same.
Exactly. And I think that's so important, right? It's like we don't want to forget it. And then there's so many different months. Like I think this weekend is like, Chinese New Year. Like there's so many different things that we have to, continue to think about, and I think it's just so important when I think about Black history, it's not about pain. It's like a really fun time. There's a lot of festivities. And there's a lot of like celebration. There's a lot of like, just accolades galore. And I think we also need to remember that history for that.
I love that. And the other thing I was thinking of just now is you're like the chief talent officer for Oscar Health, right? Is that your title?
No, vice president of talent strategy.
Oh, there you go. Okay. I knew it was some kind of big old, honcho position. Oscar Health. I'm curious to know how all of this knowledge, of our history, and you have a lot of extensive knowledge in this area in the DEIB space, but just, in the human space. How does this translate to you in your strategy role at this healthcare company? I'm curious.
Well, definitely. Well, actually, before I jump into that, I wanted to give you the name of the person. His name is Woodson, and who was the father. So Carter G. Woodson. I just
okay.
Want to good. And go out and go learn about his story, who was the father of Black History Month.
Thank you.
So, I think I'm really lucky at Oscar. I think that it's one of the most forward-thinking companies when it comes to diversity, and it's the most forward-thinking companies when it comes to like really having the actual conversations in the room. There's obviously a lot of work to do, but there's been a lot of efforts from our leadership team really thinking about that, which in some ways kind of makes my job pretty easy. And easy in the sense where I can just bring up the topic and it's spoken about and it's heard. And then a lot of questions come back and like, what do I need to do differently? How do I think about that? And, I'm going to go ahead and think about these things and come back to you. Right. And I think that's really, really, really great, when it comes to that, and especially for the members that are being served. So, I think, again, it's super important that, every company spends a lot of time allowing space and also being able to drive, these types of conversations and not only talk about them once a year and during the month of February, but talk about it all the time, which my company absolutely does.
I love that, because when we think about these topics, often it's like there's a DEIB plan and then there's a strategic plan for the organization, and they're separate and they're not connected. And so this idea of if it's all the time and it permeates everything we talk about, then it's always on our radar and it is a part of our strategy. It's just all incorporated. And so I'm trying to coach the folks that are coming to me on this strategy stuff to say, okay, let's get started from square one. Why are you doing this? Like, why do you even want to focus on this? What is your why? What's your organizational why on this? And then getting to that. And then from there, it's like, okay, so now let's look at your organizational, the strategic initiatives, the plan you already have. And let's see how we can incorporate it into that instead of having a separate thing that sits side of desk, that sits on the side that we forgot to get to type of thing. Right. Mm-hmm. And if you do a chief diversity officer, make sure that person's on the executive leadership team so that it's always there too. So it's like, how do we continue to do that? Because we know this. I mean, I think of this, even just total side note. I think about it at home. I think about it with, eating right. I think about it with my children. Like, there's all these things that are just like these afterthoughts.
Yeah.
And if we don't keep it like front and center and make it a part of our process and do it very consistently, it just goes on the side.
Yep.
Right. And this is one of those things I think that could easily do that.
The question is no longer, is remote work here to stay? But rather, what does the future of remote work hold? And how can we best prepare for it? As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to take the world by storm, and employees continue to learn how best to work from home, keeping those employees engaged and productive has been an unprecedented challenge for leaders everywhere. At Employee Fanatics, we've been keeping our ears to the ground and intently listening to employees for months to discover what their needs are in this moment and, perhaps more importantly, how those needs will evolve in the coming months. Our new thought paper, Work from Home and Work from the Heart, Reimagining the Future of Remote Work and Employee Engagement, is the culmination of that careful listening process and will guide you and every leader within your organization to reimagine the ways in which you can use work from home processes to engage and empower every team member. To download your copy, visit employeefanatics.com today.
Do you want to be the most innovative company, right? And I think that's where it lies, right? It's like, why don't you be the one company that makes it different? And put that in front of a business standpoint, because every other company is like, they can't do it. This is the reason why we have these issues. We have that issues. There's just like this virtuous cycle of like, not getting in there. But I think what's different about my company is that they're just really focused on that in the right ways. And I think that a lot of companies really should think about how to even have the conversations in a comfortable way, not feeling like they're in threat.
Yeah, that safe space thing. I was talking to a leader earlier today, and he was saying, well, yeah, there's certain of my teams do better at this, where they have the conversations, they're fine with drilling down, even having the conversations that aren't so popular. What I am discovering is when I dive into all these like culture surveys or diversity and DEIB surveys, and I'm looking at comments and all that, and there are factions of folks that are maybe like the Christian, it's something religious, so like a religious thing, or it could be a white guy thing. It could be like many different things. But when the comments come up, it's kind of like, well, I don't know if I feel comfortable. I feel like we're spending a whole bunch of time talking about this and that. Why can't we just basically all be friends? Why can't we all just, do this? And why do we have to continue to highlight this? Or this thing that you're talking about bringing forward is against my, the religious liberty or whatever. And so what I do is and my team is try to figure out, how do we get all those voices out? Because those voices have to come forward too. It can't just be the voices that are the trendy voices, is what I'm saying. Right. It really can't. It has to be all the voices, which means we're going to be about to get really uncomfortable. And how are we able to talk through it where in the end, maybe we were able to listen so much more that we don't agree with them necessarily. But if we can get to the bottom or listen so much more, maybe we can see a scintilla of where they are coming from. Doesn't mean we agree with it, because this is what I always tell people. Doesn't mean I agree with the opposite view, or the person who says, why are we talking about Black people? But I need to find out why he or she thinks that. Is it because they're upbringing? Is it because of pain that they had? What is it?
That to me, Heather, is a lot of energy. Wow. I don't know because the why to me, and I'll tell you why, it's a lot of energy to go there, because people, and I like to think highly of humanity, they probably don't even know why, right? And I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. They probably don't even know why, right? It's like, I'm going to go back into my neuroscience days, but we used to run experiments, and the tone that we use for a sensory specific association, so all your five senses, and like how you associate like learning with that, right? And for humans, it's actually our smell is the most, and taste are our strongest sensory specific, not our eyes and not our touch. and in our hearing either, because, we can't hear as well as any other mammal on the planet. But I say that because it's something called, repeated exposure to a stimulus creates learning, right? So if you break it down in that context, like if you are repeatedly in a particular stimulus over time, then the learning becomes concrete, right? If you're not if you're not put in a position to be in a different environment or a different set of stimulus to kind of get you there, then you are going to have a bias towards X. Yes. And that change is going to be an aversion after a while because it's going to be in threat mode, and because the change is challenging, what you've constantly been like exposed to, that stimulus you've been exposed to. So the reason why I jumped out and be like, I don't know, that's a lot of energy, is because it's really defining, like, having a question like, tell me about your environment. What repeated exposures have you had? Right? And it's not to ask questions to make people feel bad. It's just to really better understand.
Yes.
You can meet them where they are. And then you're not going like, I just want to know why you're like this.
Well, no, that's what I mean. What I mean is I wouldn't ask why, but how I get to why is to ask the question you just did. To ask the question that you just did or something like that is exactly how I get to why. So for me, I'm always like with surveys, for example, I get to why by reading the comments. So they may say like, I gave you a 9. Why did you, can you tell me why you actually responded that way? And then I see the comments that gives me the why, right? So when I'm going into like, let's say a listening session or focus group, I might say, oh, I'm curious, why did you respond that way? And then what's going to give me the why is I'm going to be hearing all of the gradations of the responses. They're going to say all these different, and I'm going to go, so what it sounds like is this. So let me just go a little deeper there. Sometimes what happens is you're able to break people down because you are listening for intent. You're listening for history. You're listening for the lens. If you're not listening for that, all you're doing is like listening in your shoes. So basically what we do all day is we listen in our shoes. We don't step outside of our shoes. We listen in our shoes for what's happening. And like you said, it's all about our filter. What did we learn after the multiple times we've heard these things in our home, in our community, right? But what it takes the stronger of a person to say, okay, I'm about to jump out of mine. I want to listen to you. I'm going to ask these questions and I'm going to jump out of my shoes in my unique experience to be like, okay, let me see if I can get to the bottom of where you're coming from. I am not probably going to agree with you. There's plenty of times I haven't. But you know what? Now I know where it's coming from. Like if it sounds like narrow-minded, if it sounds prejudicial, like whatever it is, I'm like, oh, okay. And then for me, because emotional intelligence is like my strength, then I'm going to go, okay. So now I've heard you and I get where you're coming from. Now right. I'm not saying I'm not saying it is right. I'm saying I get it now. Okay, so now let's see if we can come a little closer to each other. And this is where that, for me, when I think of meeting people where they're at, it literally is jumping out of my shoes and kind of just either standing in the middle or trying to get into theirs and just be like, let me see. And okay. So you think that we shouldn't talk about Black people or whatever it is, like whatever the thing is, right? You're trying to get to the bottom of it. That's just the work I do around the listening and the responding and trying to synthesize and get the data for the company to figure out where they need to go. It's having to go that deep, and it's not comfortable. It really is not a comfortable conversation. It's not comfortable. And like, sometimes you're like, I decide like, am I working today on this or am I not? Right. Cause there's some days I'm like, I can't today. I have to say that here's this funny thing about it. I am like that all the time at work, but I do not work hard. I'm not very good at home. Like every day I struggle and I need to get better at home, but it's because I give so much of myself in that like work time to do and to do that thing and to be that person. And when I get home and it's time for me to get out of my shoes and get into my kids' shoes, it's just not always as easy because I've already given so much of myself. So you're right. As you talked about earlier, when you talked about energy, I think so much of the stuff that we're facing right now in our world, whether it's political or racial or any of this, the divide and the differences, has so much to do with the level of energy we're willing to put in to understand what's happening. It is. Yeah, definitely. It's a lot of that. And I think it's really just making sure that we are also doing the right kind of activism. And I have a new set of activism that I'm doing, that I've started maybe a few months back, is activism on myself, right? And that means like I'm taking care of myself. Like self-care is a priority, and that is a form of activism. Making sure that my mind, body, and soul is healthy. My family is, grounded. And, all of those things are a priority to my life and to my world. And whenever we have a moment where folks are in a place
where they really need to think very deeply about, why and how, people need to do this. Are they getting burnt out? It's really about self-care, right? That is the center of my life. And, that is, a very rich form of activism. So I just, anyone out there who is considering like, working out is a priority or like a treat. No, that is all the things that you need to do. Working out, eating right, drinking a lot of water, and being very balanced, and also having quiet time, at least 15 to 20 minutes a day for yourself to kind of regroup, rethink, or even coming out. A lot of people are working from home, going out and hugging their family. Like that is a recharge as well. So it's like that kind of work is so important to be able to continue on and push forward and be in these spaces where there's a lot of people that look like us, in these spaces.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Two things that came up for me in the book that's coming out, The Art of Carrying Leadership. The first chapter is on self-leadership, and one of the sub chapters there is on self-care. We cannot move forward with any of these efforts that we want to do if we don't take care of ourselves first, period. Just kaput, period. And interestingly enough, it's been the theme that just keeps boiling up over and over, particularly since the pandemic, because I've been doing the podcast now for about 3 years. And this last 7 or 8 months has really, I've heard many of the folks in the show talk about taking self-care. Self-care also includes like giving yourself grace. So self-grace and self-compassion and all of those things just during this time, because we're all just so stretched thin. And yeah, I mean, what I'd really like to, let people understand is that we all have so many identities, and it's really hard to boil them. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to boil those down. If you would look at you or I, you'd say, okay, that's a Black woman. You'd say, oh, yep, that's a Black woman. And then that's what you would say the identity is. But so that's 2 identities, but there's like probably 25 more identities underneath the surface for both of us, right? And I think the key is that that's the way it is for every single human. So trying not so much to put people in their boxes and to really get to know, people as humans, as who they are. What is their background? What is it that keeps them up at night? What are their, adversities? What is it? It's the only way we can get good at any of this stuff we think called life, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's more, I remember there was a woman that I worked with. I was just actually thinking about her this morning, who was, at the time that I was working with her, she was, I think, in her early 30s. She had 6 men report into her, some of which their careers were older than she was. And she was their leader. And she was, not from America. So she was an immigrant. She had an accent. I think her family's from Bangladesh. She was born on the Benghazi Strip. She's of Muslim descent and a woman, all the things that, people can we count them up like it was like 7 layers. And, when people would come to her and say, you don't have experience, you don't know what struggle is. And she would just list them out. I said, you don't know my life. If you think your only problems is the business world and getting these slide decks together and getting the board organized and all those different things, well, try to walk a mile in my shoe, not being with all of these different things that makes her absolutely wonderful and beautiful and just different. But she has a worldview just for being born.
So true.
And I think people need to look at that, right? Like in the context of, how did someone get here?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I was saying. Is like when someone's sitting in front of me when I'm in these lesson sessions, or I'm in front and someone says something that just really kind of throws me back, because it challenges my truth, because we all have our own different levels of truth too. And when it challenges me, and I do exactly what you just said. Why are they here? Like, and so when you say like just being born, like who were you when you were that? And I know, again, that takes energy, but you do have to take the time to kind of build rapport, and building rapport does mean a little bit about the person. You can't even begin to make generalizations unless you've taken that time to dig deeper. You just can't, which is why I always talk about in Carrying Leadership, spend the one-on-one time with people, because how they present at work, they could have 12 kids, 6 of them foster. They could have if they're in the US, they could have a Russian parents who can't speak English. They could have 2 grandparents that are in the aging. I mean, you do not know what is happening that all of a sudden they present to work in this one way. And you're like, why are they so, why did they come off really rough in meetings or whatever? And it's like, okay, yeah, we need to work on that. But what is that about?
Mm-hmm.
And if you start to see there's this all against them, because we're all like sitting around with our own baggage all the time. I'm not saying like you have to sit there and cry with them every second. I'm not saying like spend hours and hours with this. I'm just saying like take the time little by little to dig a little deeper. And when you do that, then you're actually able to speak to the person exactly how they need to be spoken to. You're able to get, right? It's like, you're feeling me, I'm feeling you.
Yeah, exactly. Get into them a little bit more. I also think that there is, for me, I always tell people, and just going back to Black History Month, like it's about just being curious, right? Curiosity is the best thing to have in these situations, right? And kind of go down the whys. And I think that will help people lean in a little bit more, because then they, are on their own self-exploratory journey, and, they will, and I say they, people that are, not people of color, they'll just learn how connected they are to this history.
You say that, like, I'm biracial, and I'm still learning how I'm connected to the history. So, I mean, I do think it's people of color too, because there's a lot of us who don't even know, like, I didn't know that about what you talked about earlier with Abraham Lincoln, and I just didn't know that. So again, there's probably tons you don't know. There's a lot we just don't know. Right. Yeah. And so I think we all need to get more connected to our joint history.
Yeah, it's our history. So get connected to it. That curiosity will make you feel like, the best case scenario, you found out that like if you have white descent, and then they were like an abolitionist, it was a part of this movement, which totally existed. There were so many white people that were part of the Underground Railroad that really helped people, make their marks through the North, to escape slavery. There's like so much of that. Yes. And I want everyone to kind of know the goodness that everyone's been a part of on both sides.
I know everybody who's listening, you see why I keep bringing her back. Right? There's just so much goodness there. I feel like we make magic together every time we're together. Just so much there. So for those who are listening, because there's just, my head just is, I'll be thinking about this all weekend for sure. If you have found as much value just in our conversation, well, number one, let me know if you want to hear more, because we'll continue to do this, and we'll continue to do LinkedIn Lives and any other type of mediums to, bring us together and more people. If there are favorites that you heard on the show and you'd like to combine them together, I'd love to do like, maybe bring some folks back on like a panel podcast. So do that. Don't forget to refer, to share this far and wide. Don't forget to write a review on Apple Podcasts. I'm going to say it over and over again. We want people to hear this good stuff, because they will be filled up too, just like you are right now. Thank you so much, lady, for being here. I know we've reached our time, because believe me, you and I could talk for hours and hours, but you always give me so much energy. I'm just so thankful for you.
Thank you so much.
And thanks everybody for joining the Leadership Heart podcast. Be well.